Hi, I'm Alex Eala, and these are three things you don't know about me. The first is I don't know how to ride a bike. Second, I love watching sitcoms like Friends or Modern Family. And third is that I suck at every other sport that's not tennis.
10 things you didn't know about Alex Eala. Her name is Alex. She is one of the most exciting young players in women's tennis. She is barely into her 20s, and almost everything about how she got here is completely unlike the story you think you know. There is a new generation taking over professional tennis. Coco Gauff already has Grand Slam titles. Mirra Andreeva is breaking through. The sport is young, brilliant, and moving fast. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, quietly without much fanfare, a teenager from Quezon City in the Philippines has been climbing a ladder that almost nobody outside her home country saw her on until she was already shaking up the WTA Tour. Alex Eala became the first Filipino and the first Southeast Asian to win a junior Grand Slam singles title when she lifted the trophy at the U.S. Open Girls Championship in 2022. A few years later, as a qualifier ranked well outside the top 100, she walked into a WTA 1000 event in Miami and started beating Grand Slam champions. She is not a fluke. She is not a wild card story. She is a genuinely elite tennis player in the earliest chapters of what looks like a very long career. But here's the thing about Alex Eala. The stats tell one story. The person behind the stats tells something far more interesting. Before we talk about what she has done on a tennis court, there are 10 things about this young woman that most people have no idea about. And by the time you have heard all 10, you will understand exactly why she is going to be one of the biggest names in this sport for a very long time. Number 1. She may be related to one of the most recognizable politicians in the Philippines. Filipino outlets have reported that Alex's mother is a cousin of Senator Risa Hontiveros, one of the country's most prominent lawmakers. It is the kind of detail that gets buried under highlight reels and ranking points, a quiet family connection that most casual fans of women's tennis on the other side of the world will never hear about. It does not show up in a forehand, it does not show up in a serve, but it is there in the background of her story. A reminder that the people who end up dominating a global sport almost always come from somewhere specific, with families and histories that shaped them long before a tour official ever wrote their name on a draw sheet. Number 2. Tennis was simply the air she breathed at home. Her parents played the game themselves, recreationally at first, the way plenty of families have a sport that just lives in the household. There was no master plan, no 5-year development program drawn up before she could read. A racket was just part of the furniture of her childhood, and she gravitated toward it the way kids gravitate toward whatever their parents already love. By the time anyone outside her family was paying attention, the habit was already years old. The instincts that let Alex Eala redirect pace from the baseline against players ranked inside the world's top 10 were built in a home where hitting a tennis ball was simply what people did after dinner. Number 3. She left home for another continent before most kids leave middle school. Around the age of 13, Alex moved to Mallorca, Spain, to train at the Rafael Nadal Academy, one of the most demanding development programs in the sport. 13 years old, on a different continent, training in a language that was not her first, with a family on the other side of the world, and a goal that had no guarantee attached to it. Most teenagers at 13 are worried about which lunch table to sit at. Alex Eala was waking up early to train under a system built by one of the greatest players who has ever picked up a racket, because her family believed the opportunity was worth the distance. That is not a normal childhood. That is something else entirely. Number 4. She trained inside the same walls and the same philosophy that built Rafael Nadal's career. The academy is not just a tennis facility. It is built around a specific idea of discipline, of grinding out points, of never assuming a match is over until it actually is. Spend your formative years inside a system like that, and it tends to leave a mark on how you compete. Watch Alex Eala fight through a long rally she has no business winning, and you are watching a philosophy that was handed down to her in Spain, thousands of miles from where she grew up. Number 5. She became a trailblazer before she ever turned professional. When she won the U.S. Open girls singles title in 2022, she did not just win a tournament. She became the first player from the Philippines and the first player from Southeast Asia to win a junior Grand Slam singles championship. In a country where basketball dominates almost every conversation about sports, where tennis has historically struggled to produce names that travel internationally, a teenager from Quezon City put her country on a stage it had never stood on before. That kind of weight does not sit lightly on anyone's shoulders, let alone a teenager's. She carried it anyway. Number 6. The Climb. After that junior title was
Hi, I'm
not
Alex Eala,
glamorous.
and these are
Junior
three
Grand
things you
Slam
don't know
titles
about
are
me. The
wonderful
first is
headlines,
I
but
don't
they do
know how to
not
ride a
automatically
bike.
translate into a
Second,
professional career.
I love
What follows
watching
is usually
sitcoms like
years
Friends
of
or
grinding
Modern
through
Family.
lower-tier
And
ITF
third is
events
that
and
I
WTA
suck at
qualifying
every other
draws,
sport
playing in
that's
front of
not
small
tennis.
crowds in cities most fans could not point to on a map, building a ranking point by point with no guarantee any of it pays off. Alex Eala did exactly that. She worked her way up from outside the world's top 100 through the unglamorous middle tier of professional tennis, the part of a career nobody puts in a highlight reel, the part that actually decides whether a talented junior becomes a real professional. Number 7. In March of 2025, all of that grinding turned into one of the most talked about runs in recent WTA history. Entering the Miami Open as a qualifier, ranked far outside the tournament's seeded players, Alex Eala beat not one, but two Grand Slam champions back-to-back, including a player who had won a major title earlier that same season, on her way to the quarterfinals of a WTA 1000 event. Qualifiers are not supposed to do that. Players outside the top 100 are not supposed to walk through a draw full of major champions. For one stretch of one tournament, on one of the biggest stages in the sport, Alex Eala did exactly that, and the tennis world had to learn her name, whether it had been paying attention before or not. Number 8. That run did not come from nowhere, even though it looked that way to anyone who had not been watching closely. It came from a 13-year-old who left home for Spain, from years of grinding through ITF Futures events with no cameras, from a junior Grand Slam title that most casual fans had already forgotten about by the time Miami happened. The players she beat that week had years of tour experience and millions of fans. She had a ranking that barely registered on a television graphic. The gap between those two realities is exactly what made the run feel impossible, and exactly why it wasn't. Number 9. She is, by simple necessity, fluent in more than one tennis culture. Growing up in the Philippines, training in Spain, competing on a tour that moves through North America, Europe, and Asia within a matter of months, Alex Eala has had to adapt to languages, surfaces, time zones, and playing styles that most players her age never have to juggle at once. That kind of constant adaptation builds a different kind of resilience than simply being a gifted athlete. It builds someone who is comfortable being the outsider in the room, because she has been the outsider in the room for most of her career. Number 10. The academy that built her was built by the player who, more than anyone, defined the kind of relentless, point-by-point competitiveness she now brings to her own matches. Training inside Rafael Nadal's program meant Alex Eala grew up inside the daily habits and philosophy of one of the most mentally tough champions the sport has ever produced. She did not just admire him from a television screen, the way most young players admire their idols. She trained under the system he built every single day for years. Few rising players on tour can say their competitive identity was shaped that directly by a legend of the game. Here's what you get when you put all 10 of those things together. You get a young woman from Quezon City whose family has roots that quietly reach into Philippine politics, who grew up in a house where tennis was simply part of daily life, who left everything she knew at 13 to train on another continent inside the philosophy of one of the greatest competitors the sport has ever seen, who became the first player from her entire region of the world to win a junior Grand Slam title, then spent years in the unglamorous middle tier of professional tennis nobody puts on a highlight reel, before walking into Miami as an outsider and beating Grand Slam champions back-to-back in front of the whole tennis world. Alex Eala is not rising because she got lucky. She is rising because she did the work nobody was watching for years before anyone was watching at all. She is not close to her ceiling. Everyone who follows her closely agrees on that. The Philippines has been waiting a long time for a tennis player who could compete on the sport's biggest stages. The question now is not whether Alex Eala belongs there. She has already answered that. The question is how high she goes from here. Learn the name. You're going to be saying it for a long time. If this story moved you, subscribe for more incredible tennis content. 10 things you